NFL defensive coordinators thought they had Caleb Williams completely figured out as just another creative off-script passer. But buried next-gen stats GPS tracking microchips embedded in his pads just expose a terrifying reality that is sending shockwaves through every film room in the league. Clocking in at a mind-bending 20+ miles per hour on routine scramble breakouts, Williams isn't just escaping pressure, he is matching the raw, explosive top-end speed of elite NFL skill players. When a quarterback can pinpoint a throw across his body or turn a broken play into a 30-yard sprint in the blink of an eye, traditional zone coverages completely shatter. Defensive linebackers are suddenly stranded in no man's land, helpless as Chicago's lethal red zone attack transforms into an unguardable dual threat engine. The secret tracking data is finally out, proving that Caleb Williams isn't just adapting to the NFL, he is fast breaking the entire sport. For months, the standard narrative surrounding Chicago's young signal caller remained neatly packaged within the boundaries of traditional scouting reports. Analysts endlessly dissected his footwork in the pocket, his platform-independent throw mechanics, and his rare ability to improvise when the primary structure of a play disintegrated into chaos. Yet, all of that commentary completely missed the underlying physical foundation powering his game. Down on the field, away from the broadcast cameras and the distant eye of the press box, a far more dangerous reality was silently registering inside the modern infrastructure of NFL performance tracking. Every single player entering the turf is monitored by microchip sensor arrays sewn directly into their shoulder pads, capturing spatial orientation, acceleration curves, and top-end speed at high-frequency intervals. During high-tempo team periods and unscripted practice reps, those sensor arrays recorded numbers that stunned the coaching staff and analytics department alike. When Williams broke out of the pocket on scramble drills, the tracking telemetry spiked into a tier reserved almost exclusively for premier running backs and elite perimeter wide receivers. The digital readouts showed Williams regularly topping 20 miles per hour within just a few violent, decisive strides, a threshold that fundamentally alters how defenders perceive distance and angles in real time. On television, a quarterback moving out of the pocket often looks like a play extending purely through hesitation or slippery navigation. The next-gen stats tell a vastly different story. This is pure, unadulterated velocity applied with surgical intent. What looked like a classic off-script extensions on film was actually an athletic flashpoint, transforming a standard dropback into a high-speed breakout that leaves second-level defenders completely vulnerable. The weight of this discovery cannot be overstated when viewing the landscape of modern NFL defenses. Most media figures continue to lump Williams into the category of a classic buy-time quarterback, someone who moves sideways to allow receivers to uncover downfield. But the hard telemetry proves he possesses raw, linear gears that directly rival the game's most terrifying open-field weapons. When an offensive play breaks down, a defense isn't just dealing with a passer looking to float a throw over a safety's head. They are confronting a ball carrier who accelerates into the open field at a speed that forces cornerbacks to abandon their coverage responsibilities just to preserve their tackling angles. Inside the team's facility, the realization hit with maximum impact during routine review of practice footage overlaid with tracking metrics. Coaches saw a quarterback who wasn't merely surviving pressure, but actively exploiting the over-pursuit of defensive ends by hitting top speed before pass rushers could even flip their hips. The narrative framing Caleb Williams as simply a clever, magic-making improviser was officially dead. The raw data revealed something far more lethal to defensive coordinators across the league. A quarterback running with genuine dynamic track speed, capable of turning any routine play into an immediate 60-yard house call. To fully grasp the magnitude of what next-gen stats uncovered, you have to contextualize these tracking figures against the absolute fastest skill position players in professional football. When most fans think of elite quarterback athleticism, they picture designated quarterback draws, designed options, or frantic scrambles behind a collapsing pocket. But tracking data doesn't care about player position, reputation, or narrative. It measures raw velocity in miles per hour across the open grass. When Williams triggers a scramble and crosses the line of scrimmage, his top-end tracking speeds consistently hit over 20 miles per hour. To put that into proper perspective, that puts him in an ultra-exclusive tier alongside league-leading running backs like Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, and Jahmyr Gibbs. In fact, across recent tracking cycles, only a handful of elite ball carriers in the entire NFL registered more individual 20-plus mile-per-hour ball carrier events than Chicago's young quarterback. When you place Williams' metrics side by side with the rest of the league's signal callers, the contrast becomes even more stark. While dual-threat mainstays are renowned for their slippery lateral movement, Williams is generating explosive, top-tier linear speed that mimics a frontline tailback breaking into the secondary. Defensive coordinators build game plans under the fundamental assumption that a quarterback's scramble is a secondary threat, a broken play where the passer is actively searching for an open receiver before reluctantly taking whatever yardage the defense concedes. But when a quarterback routinely reaches top-end track speeds in 3 strides, that basic mathematical assumption falls apart entirely. He is no longer just a quarterback escaping a sack. He is an elite, open-field runner operating with the arm talent of a franchise passer. This shift in athletic output marks the dawn of what coaches inside the facility are calling the decisive running paradigm. In his early development, Williams' athletic highlights were defined by lateral evasion, spinning away from unblocked rushers, reversing field, and floating late passes back across the grain. While those plays made for viral highlight reels, they also carried inherent risk, extended play duration, and occasionally led to catastrophic lost yardage. The transformation occurred when Williams began pairing his rare physical velocity with instant, linear decision-making. Instead of dancing along the perimeter to prolong a passing window that might never open, he began committing to vertical lanes the millisecond he identified vacated grass. Head coach Ben Johnson pinpointed this exact evolution during film review, highlighting how Williams transformed raw speed into an offensive weapon through sheer intent. As Johnson noted, when he puts his foot in the ground and goes north, he's making decisions. He's a decisive runner. That single quote encapsulates the terrifying reality facing opposing defensive play callers. A passer who scrambles hesitatingly gives defensive backs time to rally, break off their coverage, and make a controlled tackle for a modest gain. A quarterback who plants his back foot transitions from passer to sprinter instantly and hits 20 miles per hour downhill forces defenders to make split-second decisions at full speed. There is no period of deliberation, no extra crossover step, and no floating in space, only immediate vertical momentum that punished second-level defenders for turning their backs in coverage. By replacing lateral hesitation with immediate vertical acceleration, Williams forces defensive coordinators to rethink how they align their front seven. When a defender hesitates for even a fraction of a second, wondering whether Williams is going to unleash a 40-yard strike down the sideline or tuck the ball and run, the play is already lost. At 20-plus miles per hour, that split-second hesitation translates directly into 15 to 20 free yards before a safety can even establish a pursuit angle. The data proves that Williams isn't just relying on chaotic backyard improvisation anymore. He has mastered a calculated, high-speed approach to running that leaves defenses entirely devoid of correct answers. This spatial dilemma forces defensive coordinators into an inescapable tactical nightmare every time they draw up a zone coverage package against Chicago's offense. Traditional defensive architecture relies entirely on strict mathematical rules. Linebackers drop to precise depth to clog intermediate passing lanes, nickel cornerbacks sit on out-breaking routes, and safeties cap the vertical seam to protect against deep shots. In standard play call structures, these zone defenders can turn their hips, focus on the quarterback's eyes, and sink back with complete confidence because most quarterbacks require multiple seconds to transition from a passing posture to an explosive run. But when a quarterback can hit 20 miles per hour downhill in the blink of an eye while maintaining the physical mechanics to fling a 40-yard strike across his body on the run, those spatial rules completely disintegrate. Defensive coordinators can no longer rely on geometry. They are forced into a constant state of structural panic. At the center of this tactical breakdown is the impossible positioning forced upon middle linebackers and apex defenders. During a standard dropback, a linebacker's primary responsibility in cover 2 or cover 3 zone shells is to open his hips, gain 10 to 15 yards of depth, and take away dig, hook, and crossing routes operating in the middle of the field. Under normal circumstances, if the quarterback leaves the pocket, the linebacker has ample time to assess the scramble, match the quarterback's angle, and rally downhill to make a tackle for a negligible gain. Against Caleb Williams, however, that extra second of processing time no longer exists. The moment Williams tucks the ball and accelerates past the line of scrimmage at premier skill player speeds, any linebacker sink dropping 15 yards deep finds himself stranded in absolute no man's land. If the linebacker freezes in his zone drop to protect against Williams' rare ability to throw across his body back over the middle, Williams turns on the jets, splits the seam, and instantly converts a routine broken play into a 30-yard chunk run. Conversely, if the linebacker reacts to the scramble instantly, breaks out of his coverage drop, and sprints downhill to fill the lane, Williams uses that exact split-second step against him. With flick of the wrist arm talent, Williams can pull the ball back, throw off his back foot while moving at full speed, and drop a dart into the massive void left directly behind the advancing linebacker. The defender is perpetually wrong. Attack the run and get carved up overhead, or respect the pass and give up massive operational territory on the ground. This spatial disruption radiates throughout every single tier of the defensive formation. Safeties who would normally step down to assist on intermediate routes are forced to stay pinned deep in the secondary, terrified of leaving their coverage responsibilities exposed to Williams' off-platform velocity. Cornerbacks in deep third zones are placed in an agonizing bind. They cannot leave their assigned receivers to chase the ball carrier without risking an immediate long-distance touchdown throw. The ripple effect means that when Williams breaches the first line of defense, there is literally no second-level safety net waiting to absorb the blow. A 5-yard scramble that would normally end with a slide against a traditional passer routinely turns into a 25-yard explosive play simply because no defender on the field can afford to vacate their zone until Williams physically crosses the line of scrimmage. By dismantling the spatial integrity of zone coverage, Williams effectively strips defensive coordinators of their go-to safety nets. Standard defensive playbooks depend on zone concepts to suppress big plays and keep the football in front of the defense, forcing the offense to execute long, methodical drives. But when the quarterback's pure linear speed transforms every broken play into a dynamic track meet, zone coverage ceases to provide safety. Instead, it creates wide open corridors and paralyzed defenders who are continually forced to guess between two equally catastrophic outcomes. Defensive coordinators are left staring at their play sheets with zero comfortable solutions, watching their carefully crafted spatial rules crumble under the weight of pure, unadulterated speed. Where this athletic shift becomes truly terrifying for the rest of the league is inside the condensed geometry of the scoring zone. In the red zone, defenses traditionally count on shrinking field margins to suffocatingly restrict passing angles, relying on tight man-to-man coverage or heavy goal line brackets to shut down passing lanes. But when a quarterback pairs 30-mile-per-hour acceleration capabilities with split-second processor speed, condensed fields transform from a defensive refuge into an absolute slaughterhouse. The overwhelming proof of this evolution exploded during recent high-pressure practice sessions, where Williams put on an absolute masterclass in short-field lethal efficiency. During a marquee 7-on-7 red zone sequence, Williams dissected elite defensive packages with laser precision, going an astounding 9 for 10, passing while carving up the secondary for 5 touchdowns in rapid succession. Every single throw was delivered with maximum authority, exploiting microscopic holes in coverage that only exist when defenders are fundamentally terrified of his physical ability to pull the ball down and breach the goal line on foot. That red zone dominance is directly amplified by his cold-blooded composure under high-stress situational pressure, most notably showcased during 2-minute situational drills. Trailing in late-game scenarios where every second dictates victory or failure, Williams operated with the surgical calm of a seasoned master, putting together a flawless 6-for-6 passing stretch to march the offense downfield without a single wasted movement or misplaced ball. In those high-stakes moments, defenders are caught in a double bind. When the clock is ticking down and the defense is forced to contest every throw, Williams' elite athletic profile prevents coverage units from simply sitting in standard passing drops. If a secondary turns its back to trail receivers across the formation, Williams immediately identifies the breach, plants his foot, and takes off downhill at top-tier speed. This lethal dynamic fundamentally alters how defensive coordinators are forced to match up against Chicago near the goal line. In close quarters situations, playing straight man-to-man coverage has effectively become a suicide mission. If a coordinator elects to press receivers and play single high or zero-man coverage without dedicated eyes on the backfield, Williams will instantly exploit the vacated rush lanes, using his 20+ miles per hour burst to cross the goal line before a safety can even disengage from coverage. To combat this, opposing schemes are now forced to allocate a dedicated linebacker or safety as a defensive spy, a sacrifice that completely breaks the mathematical balance of modern defensive football. Dedicating a defensive spy means taking a defender out of coverage entirely, leaving 3 remaining pass catchers operating against depleted individual coverage. For Chicago's dynamic receiving core, that spatial compromise is a dream come true. With defenders consumed by the threat of Williams' dual-threat acceleration, perimeter weapons like Rome Odunze gain crucial single coverage separation on physical boundary routes. Explosive dynamic threats like Luther Burden III are given wide open corridors to break tackles in space, while tight end Colston Loveland becomes an unmatchable mismatch in the seam against overwhelmed linebackers who can no longer afford safety help. The red zone field, once the area where defenses held the geographic advantage, has morphed into an arena where opposing play callers are continuously forced to pick their poison, knowing full well that every choice leads directly to 7 points on the scoreboard. The revelation of this tracking data isn't just an intriguing statistical anomaly, it marks a structural inflection point for the quarterback position itself. For decades, the NFL has grouped signal callers into rigid, prepackaged archetypes: the stationary pocket passer who wins strictly from the neck up, or the explosive dual-threat running quarterback who operates largely through designated options and quarterback draws. Williams' telemetry completely collapses that binary distinction. By effortlessly blending top-tier open-field speed, clocked repeatedly above the 20-mile-per-hour barrier with rare platform-independent arm talent, he represents the evolutionary acceleration of what it means to lead a modern offense. He isn't merely adjusting to the velocity and physical demands of the professional level, he is actively redefining how defensive units are forced to measure space, speed, and spatial leverage across 4 quarters. What makes this dual threat profile so terrifying for the rest of the league is that his speed operates as a force multiplier for his passing genius rather than a crutch. When a defense commits additional safety help over the top to blanket deep passing lanes, Williams immediately punished them by taking the vertical runway on the ground. When defensive coordinators over-index on containing his rush lanes with loaded fronts or dedicated spy packages, he ruthlessly picks apart single coverage from the pocket. It is a perpetual lose-lose scenario, where every defensive countermeasure creates a far more dangerous vulnerability somewhere else on the field. The next-gen stats microchips confirmed what game film only hinted at. Chicago possesses a talent whose ceiling cannot be suppressed by traditional defensive mechanics or conventional playbooks. Looking ahead across the league's landscape, the implications for Chicago's offensive ceiling are staggering. Combining a quarterback who generates 30-mile-per-hour threat angles with a deep, modern skill player nucleus creates an offensive ecosystem with virtually zero natural structural weaknesses. Defenses can no longer rely on blitz packages to disrupt timing because pressuring Williams simply opens wider running corridors that he can breach in a fraction of a second. They cannot sit in passive zone coverage because his raw acceleration turns modest underneath gains into game-changing explosive plays. As this system continues to refine its tempo and execution, opposing play callers are left facing an inescapable reality. Chicago's offense isn't just built to win games, it is engineered to break the fundamental rules of defensive football entirely.